Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to a very special episode of Session Tapes. We're coming to some of you live from a Twitter space for the first time ever. I'm Cam.
And I am Alex.
And we're going to run through some stuff, what's been going on in privacy, security, and deliver some searing hot takes.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. There's currently a raging storm which is settling in here in Melbourne this afternoon.
It's just hit.
It is just hitting. So if you hear some raging wind or torrential rain, don't be alarmed. There's just a severe weather event going on outside.
We're the only ones who need to be alarmed.
Yeah, but hopefully,
you guys are fine.
Hopefully it should be all okay, and we'll have a cozy little time here.
I think so. I feel cozy. I've got my little instant coffee.
It's true. I have
rain's
a little
coming down outside.
Lemon and ginger tea.
Incredible.
Which is I'm quite excited for.
It sounds delicious.
But Cam, can you reveal to us what is the first item on the bulletin today?
So there's a big issue in this world. It's funny little word of ours called surveillance capitalism. You might have heard of it. And it's been dealt a major blow recently in courts in Europe. They basically were fined around $400 million.
They being Meta, by the way.
They being Meta, of course. The owners and operators of Facebook and Instagram for breaching the GDPR, and a ruling has come down that's basically said you are required to ask people if you can sell their information to advertisers, rather than it being an implicit part of the privacy policy that everyone just kind of goes, yeah, boom, I'm in. Which is pretty big, because in situations where this kind of thing has played out previously, one of the most notable ones would be when Apple brought in their new policy where apps had to ask if they could track, and Facebook lost about $4 billion in revenue in like a year after that. Something like 60 to 90% of people were like, no, why would I want you to track me? And so it's going to shake things up a lot, and the start of a big global shift, I think.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting, I think, because when we think about surveillance capitalism, I think most of the time it's companies like Meta and I suppose Google and Amazon that really spring to mind. But it's worth noting that surveillance capitalism, it's not just a business model, it's a whole damn economic model. And surveillance capitalism has well and truly spread. It is no longer limited to big tech companies. It is absolutely in institutions and organizations and companies in every part of our lives these days. But it is still championed very much by Meta. And so in a way, I think the material blow that Meta is actually taking with this 390 million euro fine is not really that significant, and I'll explain a little bit why I feel that way, but the symbolic blow is a lot more significant, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people in a lot of different industries, or even in government using these sorts of practices, probably taking notice and probably being a little concerned, because like you said, it's spread outside of this sort of box that it lived in for a while, and it's become more than a business model but an economic model, and something that manifests itself in all different kinds of ways. I think it's kind of inevitable when you consider that like the practice of collecting and selling data is like the most profitable practice industry in the world, really.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. All of these tech companies have grown to be so large and so powerful, and this is their business model. Their business model is taking people's personal lives and their personal experiences and having a mechanism to commodify that, which generally is just targeted advertising, right? Like most of the time, that's how we see it manifest. And it is really inherently quite evil, I would say. But, as I sort of alluded to before, I'm not sure if this 390 million euro fine, which has just been laid against Meta, is actually going to do that much. So when I first saw that number, I was like, wow, that is a really big number.
Yeah,
I wonder what kind of impact that will actually make on Meta's sort of overall earnings. And so I went and took a look, and in Q4 of last year, their net income was 4.6 billion US dollars. And their total revenue was $32 billion US.
It's a joke, dude. It's actually a joke, because it's like, obviously it's not a small amount of money, but like when you're talking about trying to like curb certain behavior by passing down fines, if that behavior is bringing in revenue that far exceeds what the financial penalty is, then like it's so clear that it's not going to...
Never going to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the problem is, even if you fined Meta sufficiently such that you completely crippled their business. If you aren't careful, you're just going to get some other business or that's going to come and do the exact same practices.
If the same like incentives exist and the same capacity exists for people to do the same thing in other ways or whatever, they will do that. Pretty rough.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really interesting. I was reading this article which was about this, and I was questioning whether litigation and fines were really the right way forward, partially because of this, right? Because how much of a dent can you really make? And I think really, like you were saying before, Apple's decision to bring in the Ask App Not to Track and the opt-in tracking has made more of a dent in Meta's business by far. I think they estimated that it would cost them like $10 billion or something like that.
It was kind of crazy. And it's so weird to think about it. It's like all it is consent. It's like all it is asking people if they're comfortable with Meta doing this.
And overwhelmingly people are not.
Yeah, it's like this whole $1 trillion industry just like founded on like being able to engage in practices which, if there was any consent involved, they wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, it really hinges on begging for forgiveness as opposed to asking for permission.
It's crazy.
Which is completely ridiculous. But I was reading it, and the regulators didn't actually give specific instructions as to what Meta needed to do to come in line with GDPR. And on the flip side, Meta basically said, this determination, we're not taking it too seriously. We just haven't figured out what our legal justification is going to be to continue doing this just yet. Which, is obviously...
So disrespectful.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's legalese for, we haven't figured out how to wrangle our way out of this situation just yet, but we're confident that we will, even though we know what we're doing is extremely wrong and abhorrent.
They're like, we'll find a way. You can't stop this.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I wonder if they are just trying to buy time. Because obviously if they openly admit that their business model is unsustainable and unethical, that's going to cause, and they're already facing a lot of issues with
huge
their
issues.
Stock price.
Facebook in particular, right? It's like rough. Apparently those proceedings could take, the appeals process could take years.
So they are appealing the decision.
It definitely seems as likely, and I don't think that they're gonna get out of this. I really feel that it's like a bit of a watershed moment in terms of creating legislation that can rein in this kind of behavior. But
it does feel like a domino of sorts.
For
that
sure.
is definitely for sure.
Yeah.
But whether we're actually going to see widespread change, I'm not so convinced just yet, especially when at the moment it looks like the thing that's making the bigger dent is, on the one hand, Apple, which has a relatively positive attitude towards these issues, but on the other hand, it's just other businesses doing the same thing but better. Things like TikTok and other social media platforms are making huge inroads into Meta's revenue, but not by having more ethical business practices, just by doing the exact same thing. And that's what I was getting at before when I was saying there's this whole economic atmosphere of surveillance capitalism which is going to just keep going and keep happening, and I don't know that fining is really going to be the answer, especially when you look at something like TikTok, right, which is not going to care about a fine relating to the GDPR.
I would say not a huge issue for TikTok.
I think they're going to get away with it.
Playing by a different set of rules.
I would say so. And so, there's this whole extra layer to it as well with that. But I think that ultimately what we need to do is come up with some kind of model that decenters people's personal information, right? That isn't relying on collecting and commodifying people's personal lives, which basically means there's going to have to be radical change, like revolutionary change in this space.
Well, it's interesting because like in any of like the polling or research that you look at, there's this crazy level of awareness about data collection, and people really don't like it. It's like there's like all these like statistics you can look at that are like 80% of people or more are like aware of this issue, and like it matters to them like a fair bit. But there's like this gap in like the solutions. Like things like Session, things like Brave are interesting, like their model of like allowing the revenue to flow directly from advertisers to the person who's giving their attention, which is a resource.
Yeah.
And it's not invasive. It just uses like information that's available locally that's not collected. It's just your search terms, the device, and the country that you're in, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, that makes sense. You know, that's the direction I think that we're heading in with these sorts of things. But I don't know how it translates to something like Facebook.
Well, I mean, not to sound like a total Luddite, but I think that maybe the answer for a platform like Facebook either is to radically shift and go down, maybe like a Brave route or a Web3 style setup, or to roll back the sophistication significantly, which I don't know how this would work for Facebook in particular, but I think context-based advertising, is generally thought of as being a lot more ethical.
Yeah.
It's like, you have an article that's about the healthiest cereals, and then you advertise Cocoa Pops, next to the article, right? Because you're just making, this is how it all used to work before we started digging into people's information and having this ridiculous revolution of information.
Back before, like, Facebook would know that someone was pregnant before they actually knew themselves.
Yeah.
Getting ads.
Yeah.
Like, take me back.
But you're right as well. I think there is this latent understanding and feeling from people. They're like, this is creepy. And I know that creepy stuff is happening. And it's happening to me, and it's happening to everyone around me. And I think most people feel a sense of helplessness.
For sure.
Like, I still have a Facebook account from years ago, back when I was in school, and I have a couple of family members that I still talk to through Facebook from time to time. But I remember the last time I logged into it was months ago. But I remember when I went into it, and half the posts I was seeing were people complaining about big tech on Facebook.
It's because it's like, where do you go? People, there's not, people aren't largely aware of the alternatives that exist for like the most popular services that are out there, like things like Facebook. And also it's like, it takes time, it takes energy, and people are time poor and energy poor, and they're not going to use that limited resource to do this.
Well, there's this overwhelming sense of dissatisfaction, but people don't know where to relocate to.
Yeah, for
sure. And it's hard. We've made all these social connections on a particular platform, and that comes with this mass, and an inertia that you don't want to leave. And we saw this play out on a smaller scale with Twitter, I think, which doesn't really get grouped in necessarily with Meta and Google and companies like that.
Yeah.
But we saw a lot of people fleeing to Mastodon, and we saw how Twitter responded to that, which was basically to completely shut down all
scorched earth.
Speak, complete scorched earth approach. Being like,
crazy.
Mastodon is banned, Mastodon's social account is banned, anyone with Mastodon social in their bio is banned. It was
a huge
crazy.
L, I think. It was a huge L.
Yeah, it was rough, and I wonder if there was a similar situation which was threatening Facebook and Facebook adoption, for example, or Instagram, that was, maybe a federated or decentralized or, the community-owned platform.
Yeah, I think it's only a
if
matter
they
of
would
time.
do the same thing.
Yeah, well,
and I think overwhelmingly, probably they would.
Yeah, I think so. And you can kind of look at, like, there was, some people used Mastodon before everything happened with Twitter, but it didn't take all that much for this massive exodus to happen and for Mastodon to become almost like a sort of a household name.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like the things that were happening with Twitter were dramatic, for sure. But if you weren't sort of following the news about it, you might not have even really noticed much change to the platform.
Oh, I think for people who aren't in the tech bubble, they would have had no clue what was happening.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was just this swell of people being like, wow, we really want to, we like Mastodon, and we're going to go and hang out on Mastodon instead.
Yeah.
And I would be really interested to see what people thought of the Mastodon experience, who weren't necessarily people who were super privacy oriented necessarily had an issue with Elon Musk, but just saw that people were going to this place and were drawn to it because of social reasons, not because of principle.
Yeah, for sure. Like, people they wanted to talk to were just there.
Yeah,
that's kind of like exactly what you want in a situation like this.
Well, if you're a social network,
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also been some pretty spooky stuff going on in the world of financial surveillance, hasn't there, Alex?
There has been. So I don't know a huge amount about this report, but it looks like Homeland Security over in the US has been having a little peek, having a little look, maybe even a bit of a scrape,
a
slurp of people's transaction information.
It's sort of an area of data privacy doesn't necessarily get a lot of airtime. And I think that's one of the reasons why this issue in particular was allowed to get so bad, because it gets so little scrutiny. It turns out that there was $150 million worth of financial transfer data that was scraped by, it was like a coalition of like
multiple agencies.
Yeah, like Department of Justice, Homeland Security, etc. Across like Western Union and a few other
multiple
like money transfer
platforms.
And it's just this crazy situation that the ACLU uncovered with some freedom of information requests, that like this massive database that was just full of just ordinary random people's like financial transaction data, and that could be accessed by just any law enforcement officer, just random cops or people that have reason. Like a high clearance or whatever, to anyone, and there was no judicial oversight at all. And it's so crazy.
It's extremely scary, and I think that the financial surveillance stuff is something that flies under the radar quite a lot, and I think people often really, you assume that if your money's in a bank, then it's being tracked in some way, and in a way, I suppose you hope that it's being tracked.
By the right people, by the people that you pay to track it.
Precisely,
not the friggin' FBI.
But I think that financial information and transaction information reveals so much about people, and it is incredibly invasive that they scraped this data, like you said, without oversight, were able to use it. And as far as I'm aware, no valid reason really has been given as to why this program existed or how it got so far. And it wouldn't have been uncovered if ACLU hadn't just decided their ears were pricked. I think there was a senator that was speaking about a particular issue and mentioned that they were able to get some financial information, and they were like, hang on, what are you talking about?
Back up a sec.
And like you said, there was a freedom of information request, and it goes to show as well the value of freedom of information requests as well.
Yeah, for sure. Invaluable for this sort of stuff, because it's often hidden. There's often this view among law enforcement agencies or intelligence agencies that like they always will push this stuff as far as they can until someone pulls them up on it, because it's the same old story. It's like if like having access to people's personal information and these databases is going to make it easier to prosecute crimes, then there seems to be no limit to like the invasion of privacy that they will go to if it helps them do that job easier. It's crazy. And there was this one quote, and it was something along the lines of like, we needed, I thought I had it in the notes, I don't have it there, but it was like, we needed like this massive database of all these people in order to do like a good enough analysis to like catch these like few people that were like doing money laundering. And it's like, how do you not see like the collateral damage here? Like all of these people who've been sucked up into this database that like crazy.
Yeah, it's very sort of like posting your L's deliberately, kind of being like, oh yeah, we definitely exploited thousands and thousands of people, but we did catch one guy.
It's crazy.
It's just ridiculous. It's like, oh yeah, no, I definitely accidentally burnt down a building, but I caught this shoplifter or something like that. It's
That's
like,
literally exactly what it is.
Ends do not justify the means at all. And we really need to be inquiring and questioning this a little bit with more fervor, I think.
For sure.
And especially stuff like this. And the thing is, I think as well with transaction information is that people aren't necessarily really thinking about it. It's in the back of their minds.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is just so valuable.
Yeah, people that are sort of like going to great lengths to obscure other information, make it private in like other areas of their life. Mine does not really think about it, but then this happens to you, And also the people that were caught up in this, because it's largely like unbanked, marginalized communities that rely on these sorts of things as opposed to a bank.
Absolutely.
So people that are already like suffering from the overreach of law enforcement agencies in other areas are largely the people who are affected like by this.
Yeah, which is
sucks so much.
For some reason, so often appears to be the case.
Whoops.
Yeah, but and it also kind of loops back as well to what we were talking about with the surveillance capitalism stuff and with Meta, and we were talking about how it has expanded beyond the scope of just tech, and this is one example of how it does, right? Like we see technology companies working with law enforcement, and just because the technology companies are able to work with law enforcement doesn't justify the privacy breaches which are taking place, and in fact, in a way, it's actually just making the damage much more severe and much worse a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think that like if this big shift does start to happen from this first domino that's fallen with Meta, it's like it's attitudes, you know, it's like awareness and like the people who are having their data collected and sold, as well as the people who, you know, might actually like look at the situation and think about it more, and if they're in a position of power, might not abuse people's privacy, you know, because it's like this cultural shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we are seeing that happen, and people are becoming much more conscious.
Yeah.
And as you said, there's a lot of polling which is kind of indicating this, but it'll be really interesting to see how that shift actually plays out, because we know that it won't, if the powers that be are resisting that, it'll be interesting because it's going to come to conflict, I think.
For sure.
Inevitably.
There's going to be a revolution.
Privacy revolution of sorts, potentially.
Hey, Alex. Do you have a Wi-Fi connected refrigerator?
Look, I'm not that kind of guy. I do not.
What about like your washing machine?
My washing machine.
To the Wi-Fi?
No, my washing machine connects to the water.
That's definitely a better connection, I think, to have for your washing machine.
And
far more functional.
Yes, very functional.
Many people do, in fact, have their home appliances connected to the internet in a sort of Internet of Things, smart home, smart device situation. And there's been a story come out recently, which basically was along the lines of these executives at Whirlpool, etc., were just very upset and confused that around 50% of the people that own these devices refuse to connect them to the Wi-Fi and provide usage data to these companies. They were really upset about it.
They were so confused. They were like, it was hilarious actually reading these quotes and how like tone deaf and they are really, and how condescending almost it is as well. Basically, they were saying, these silly, stupid little consumers don't understand all the incredible refrigerator technology that we could be giving them if only they would give us access to all of their personal private information and every detail about their lives.
I just want to collect data on how and when you use your refrigerator. That's all I want.
I just want to know what level the milk is at. I want to know how long those eggs have been in the fridge.
I want to be able to see through the fridge cam.
Yeah. I want to say hi. I want to wave hello to you.
One of the quotes was like, this was in like a Wall Street Journal article. So the whole thing was played as very much like from the perspective of the executives. And it was like, the challenge is that a consumer doesn't see the true value that manufacturers see in terms of how that data can help them in the long run.
It's just honestly so ridiculous.
Yeah, so out of touch.
I think, in many cases, this is so reflective of the attitude that companies have, and so many, companies and products that have no business being quote unquote technological.
Yeah, exactly.
Are becoming that way, and a lot of the reason is because they see the amount of money that they can get. They see that it's going to make product development easier, and they're going to be able to skip steps basically using this data. But here's the thing. Just do the steps. Just do the steps, and I'll keep my data, and you give me a fridge, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's as far as it needs to go.
But it's actually, I remember I was reading recently, there was this guy lamenting how it's just basically impossible these days to buy a non-smart TV.
Yeah.
They don't even work.
Yeah.
They were saying I think they bought some cheap $300 television, which technically was a smart TV, but then they just never connected it to the internet and plugged it directly into a home computer with a HDMI cable to avoid being tracked by their own TV.
Smart. Well, TVs
kind of not smart.
In the was it called the PRISM program, the thing that Snowden revealed? like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
primary,
Yeah.
they were tracking people through Samsung TVs. They were literally listening through the microphones in the TVs.
I have a Samsung TV.
Me too, brother. We have the same TV.
You made me buy that TV.
I helped you
And
carry
now,
it home.
You did.
I'm a Samsung operative.
You are the secret agent of the Samsung corporation. Entered my home with a television device.
Yeah, it's not your fault.
And helped me set
It's
it
not
up.
your fault.
Yeah, I mean, it is really insane how difficult it is. And I wonder if this will start happening with other appliances as well. Like, because I can see, like, I don't want a smart fridge. I just want a fridge that's cold.
Yeah, that's the main function.
Yeah, which I think is pretty smart, the way that they do that.
Because your food used to be hot.
Yeah.
That's cold. That's smart.
Yeah, that's clever. Last level that way. That's thinking.
Yeah.
That's really thinking. But I can see why someone might want a smart fridge, right? There's like all these weird things and like they're gimmicky, but you can understand how it's appealing to consumers, right? Like,
for sure.
You're out of milk, just press the button on your fridge and it will order milk straight back to your door. Or like you open the thing and it's like, don't eat that, it's expired. And stuff like that
It is
interesting.
at what cost? You know,
But the
I see the
cost,
appeal.
yeah.
The feeling that you get thinking about this like smart home stuff is kind of like that just like tech dopamine hit that you get with like anything. You know, you're looking at the Apple website or something, you're looking at those nice pictures of the new iPhones. And it's like you get kind of the same feeling, and then it's like it's kind of cool, and then like marketing comes through and it's like, damn, I really need this smart fridge. I really need this like
Well, they do such a good job of selling it to you. You know, you're like, oh, my fridge doesn't have any gadgets at all. It doesn't even have an ice tray built in. You know, like I really wish that I could get some more tech in my home.
One of the funny things about the smart devices was that they want to use this this connection to the internet and this data to sell subscription services packaged with. And I'm thinking, what are they planning, dude?
What am I subscribing to?
I know that BMW's been messing around with this, doing like subscription services for like heated seats, and it's like it has the tech built into it, but you have to like pay to like turn it on. I'm like, I don't know, if I miss my payment, are they going to like turn my fridge off and all my food's gonna go bad?
I mean, I think that would be crazy. Like you missed your payment got declined, so we expired all the food in your fridge. We actually turned it into a heater.
Yeah.
And now everything is spoiled. The milk is lumpy because of you.
Ideal.
Because you update your card information, please, at the earliest possible moment, and you can continue to subsist.
Kind regards.
Yeah. But I think this happens a lot, and I wonder if, in the end, like on the manufacturing side, if it's just cheaper for them to produce every car with all the options and then let you unlock it through software, as opposed to like not custom making, but having multiple different SKUs for the different cars that people might be buying. And I know that this is something that happens a lot of the time with Apple products and probably just tech products in general. Even very recently, this happened. Apple released like a new smart speaker, and they were like, cool, is this smart speaker? It has like not a mercury gauge, but it has like a temperature gauge in the speaker, so you can ask it the temperature in the room. Whoa. And then they were like, surprise, the speaker we released 2 years ago had that the whole time, but we just didn't let you use it until now, and we've just enabled it today. So if you go and do it right now,
something's gone wrong in the world.
It's just so ridiculous. Like, why am I paying to unlock things in a device which I already own?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating, and it's a bit of a different rant or tangent, I suppose, to the smart device stuff. But I mean, it is kind of linked as well, right? In that your product can be gated by software, which is just like messed up.
We've got no shortage of rants or hot takes, that's for sure.
It's true.
We're coming up on about half an hour right now, so maybe we'll call it a day.
Yeah, I think that's probably it for episode 6 of the session tapes. For all of you who are listening in on Twitter, if you would like to see our pretty faces, bad luck, because we don't have pretty faces. But if you want to watch us in video in full HD, then this will be up on YouTube, our YouTube account, tomorrow. We will be dropping the link there. It will also be up on Spotify for those of you who would just like to listen back in crystal clear, high definition audio. I know that maybe the live stream audio wasn't as perfect, but we do have a mic which is recording some more high quality audio here.
We're also considering running this as a YouTube live stream, so if you'd be interested in that, definitely let us know. Chuck in a comment on this space and just let us know, because if we get some demand for that, then we'll definitely try it out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for Session Tapes episode 6. Thank you very much, Cam.
Thank you very much, Alex.
And thank you very much, everybody, for being here. And we'll see you next time.
Adios.